2023 marks 110 years since the 1913 Natives Land Act. The legacy of the act has been blamed for the current racially skewed ownership patterns of land and agricultural farming across South Africa. Since 1994, approximately 1 million farm workers, farm dwellers and labour tenants have been evicted from largely white-owned commercial farms. The Extension of Security of Tenure Act does not protect farm workers who work the land. This, despite their significant contributions to the economy, they don't enjoy any real protection from evictions. Despite repeated calls for a moratorium on evictions from farms, nothing has been done to stop the current onslaught of evictions. In the majority of these cases, the farm workers have lived and worked on these farms for 20 years or more, but farmers assisted by well-resourced lawyers act as if they're above the law, with no regard for rights and dignity of farm workers who spent most of their lives labouring on these farms. These evictions not only leave farm workers and their families destitute, it has led to a growing number of rural and informal settlements and farming areas characterised by unemployment, poverty, crime, including gender-based violence, and a lack of basic services. Commercial Stevedoring Agricultural and Allied Workers Union Joint General Secretary Deneco Dube joins us now to discuss this. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us. Perhaps it's important to reflect on what you see in terms of the anniversary of this Land Act, Native Land Act of 1913. So it's 110 years. But to think the fact that in 2013 it was recognized that there is very little progress and some legislative changes were then introduced. Why is this still an issue a decade later?
Good evening to you, yourself, and the viewers of SABC. We have launched this campaign today in the midst of the mass eviction that is going on, especially in the Western Cape of South Africa, where our people is still continuing to experience the segregation of the mass evictions from our own government and even the constitution that speaks to itself. And nothing has changed since 1994 for our farm workers. And today we have heard stories that is very painful. I mean that you got a grandma that is coming from the farms since she's 4 years old and she's getting 60 years in October. Just to hear that the farm owner is saying that I can't accommodate you anymore here on my farm after 56 years, and you must now go and look for yourself for alternative. And there's no institution or no alternative revenue for our people to say that we must look for our own lawyers, and the farmers have got lawyers that is very expensive. And this is woman, I'm talking about woman because the specific case that I'm referring to is someone that have lost her husband during the course of apartheid, and he was shot by the farmer. And she was the one that have to look after the family. And now suddenly, 56 years, she's been told that there is no alternative. She must go and look for alternative.
Now, in the past, it's often been characterized by this as evictions of people who are farm occupiers. But as you say, in fact, in some cases, what is happening has been the existence of people who have been living on these farms for generations, whose loved ones are even buried on the land, and yet they continue. What recourse do farm workers have if they can actually even show through birth certificates or whatever means to actually show that they've been living on these farms for generations?
You know, our people, myself was coming from a farm and I've been living there for generations that have come. Even today, our ancestors' graveyards has been demolished to make place for vineyards that has been built there. And just last week, we got a case where in the Torrens where the uprising of 2012 have happened. And this farmer have demolished the graveyards of our ancestors. And when farm workers approached him to confront him about these things, his response was that it's not in his interest to talk about these things. He wants his land. Today we heard the story about these graveyards that have been demolished. And in many farms, it had been demolished. We have tried to speak with the Department of Rural Development to say, what can we do? Because our ancestral land of our ancestors, where we know we have buried them, farmers are just destroying the graveyard, and they build vineyards on it.
Deneco, tell me this, when it's time for census and officials go around various areas, including on farms, because we know in some cases at court, farmers would claim that they are evicting people who are illegally occupying the land because they are not registered or recorded as having lived on the farm. So as someone who's lived on a farm, how does that unfold? If somebody gives birth, for instance, sometimes perhaps they don't go to a hospital, so there is no official recording of that. Do farm workers get given the option? Do they have no option at all if the farmer chooses not to record them as living on the farm?
Let me tell you the truth, what happened here now. And it's, we have been busy with cases now recently. What these farmers is saying through their lawyers that they paid so very much now is that when your child is getting 18 years old, they say that the Constitutional Court through a judgment recently has said that they are entitled to ask for your child that is over 18 and got employment from other place. They are entitled to ask for money for rent for your child. And what is very painful for farm workers is that in the history of where they stay, these children of them have no alternative way to go, but they can seek jobs on other place. And what they do now is they compel the parents to pay for the children that is over 18 and working on other places. So it's, in the Western Cape, it's even worse than in other countries, in other provinces of South Africa, because they are now entitled to say, yes, the judgment from the Constitutional Court, we can do what we please. We can ask your child to pay a rent, even if your child is working on other place. But on the other side, if you go to Europe, if you go to the EU, and you read the due diligence legislation of these people, they say, no, your child is entitled to work in the other place without being compelled to pay for anything that you want, because we have a right, even in the Bill of Rights of Constitution of South Africa, they say you have a right to family life.
You know, Deneco, I wish we had more time, because this is so heartbreaking, and I really would have loved to hear more. The fact that these are the farm workers who actually allow these farmers to be able to make a profit and continue owning this land, and they're not recognized as well. Commercial Stevedoring Agricultural and Allied Workers Union Joint General Secretary, that was Deneco Dube, just speaking to us about the plight of farm workers who continue to face evictions, and as you heard him say, and even taking legal action to throw out children who even work there, who are forced to live apart from their parents, to live elsewhere.